This series embraces a sense of adventure. It embraces a sense of going on a journey. It's aspirational, it's positive, it's inspiring, and it's uplifting. I'm Gallerano. I'm a producer on the docuseries Photographer. Our production team is a part of Jimmy Chin and Chai Vasarhelyi's production company, Little Monster Films. And Little Monster Films brings their projects to NatGeo, to Disney, and then they work together in kind of bringing those stories and series to life. They do it with films, they do it with TV shows. Obviously, it's with this series utilizing an iconic company like NatGeo, who's been around since 1888, using their robust history and production. For this particular series, it was around 3 years. Each episode took about 10 months to a year and a half. The pilot took 2 years to kind of dial in and understand the real voice of the series.
My name is Brent Kunkle, co-executive producer of NatGeo's Photographer series. I worked across all the episodes, out on the boat of Paul and Christina's episode. I was in the lab with Anna and Varma. I was in Romania and Jordan with Mohammed Mahisen, working with refugees. And I got to experience a pretty wild tornado with Crystal Wright when we were doing her episode in Texas. And then, shepherded a few other episodes and just worked across all the episodes with our showrunner Pagan and producing partners Jean and Elena. I think the common denominator with a lot of these people, they all have point of view or perspective. They're all masters of their craft. And at some point in their career, they've been at some sort of crossroads. A lot of people ask, what does it take to be a National Geographic photographer? A lot of people are great photographers, and obviously that's a big part of it, but such a big part of it is the willingness. You have to assume the risk and be willing to just get out there and do it.
We love doing really rich verite, true verite, and so how do you capture all of this at the same time? Because you're going all over the place, you're trying to organize a crew, you of course have a budget, there are a million logistics that come into play. As a production company, you're vetting as many of these problems prior to going and shooting as possible. You know that if you're going into a conflict zone, or if you're going into refugee housing, for instance, that there's going to be a certain unknown that you're going to have to wrestle with, and there's going to have to be a lot of people that you're dealing with in a really sensitive manner and making sure that you're respecting them and still getting what you need, right? I mean, you still need to be able to use the footage that you go shoot.
I think the biggest part of the sensitivity there is trust. Being with people who had experienced trauma, and you come in, want to genuinely tell their story, and you're coming from a genuine place to tell that story, but I think they have a lot of nervousness around media in general. Building trust was a big part of that, and getting access. You do your homework, you trust the people you're with.
Go to the strengths of your subjects. Dan Winters, we're shooting with NASA and the Artemis 1 launch. Dan has been filming with NASA for a really long time. He's got really deep, rich relationships with the people that run that. And so when we were talking with him, we said, hey Dan, what would you do if you were us? And we kind of take that approach with all of these places. That way we know what his system is, and we know that if we're following that, we're most likely gonna be okay. And then we bring that back to our team, and sometimes we need to make adjustments. Sometimes things don't work. There's a give and take. You can't just run in there, doc jock, run and gun style, thinking that you can just do whatever you want. It doesn't work when you work with a corporation like Disney or NatGeo. There is a intense beauty in having the support system of those, and your work is going to be seen, but it has to be above water as well.
So we always work with a fixer, whatever country we're working in, especially if it's not an English-speaking country. Releases that are translated in the appropriate language. You'd be surprised the mistakes you make early on in your career when you travel somewhere and you realize oh yeah, we have our release in English. We're shooting in some other country. And then we always walk through our release paragraph by paragraph with the subjects and make it sure they're very clear on who we are, what we're filming. So anytime you're filming with a vulnerable population and you want to release, we actually re-release them months later, right? Especially before it comes out, just to make sure that they were comfortable.
My name is Michael Crommett, and I was the director of photography for the Dan Winters episode of the National Geographic series Photographer. I was also an additional cinematographer, co-director of photography on several other episodes. There's no easier subject matter for a cinematographer than photographers in terms of making something visually interesting, right? So I mainly use the Sony FX6. This is for a variety of reasons. One, it's a pretty compact camera compared to other cameras of similar quality. This allowed, in the case of, say, Crystal Wright's episode, for me to jump in and out of vehicles when we were chasing storms in the Midwest, freed me up to have more interesting compositions. I find when the camera is smaller, one of the key elements for me with the Sony FX6 is the variable ND. That has completely revolutionized the way I shoot. I think there's two main reasons why. One is you can choose an f-stop that you want to shoot at, and you can stick to that f-stop no matter what the lighting conditions are. The other thing too is it's always a linear exposure change when you change the variable ND. So if you need to fix an exposure adjustment in post, it's just a simple matter of a linear brightness adjustment, as opposed to, say, an iris rack, which would change depth of field, contrast, all these other things. We shot nearly this entire series with the cinematographers running their own audio, and obviously a lot of times you want to try to avoid that because say you're burdened by the technical concerns of getting good audio, but I've actually found that when you are running your own audio as a camera person, you're able to keep a much more intimate set. It would just often be me, producer, director, and that's it. And I think when you're trying to tell really moving stories, the fewer people that can be there, the better. And so by running my own audio, this really freed us up to be creative, to be emotional, and to really make a connection with the photographers we were covering. There's an old expression in photography, the old F8 and be there. You know, this idea that it's not necessarily important, all the technical details, but if you get the moment, that's the most important thing. My view of photographers has shifted. I see them as vital in an age when everyone can take a photograph. They're more than just, clicking a shutter. They are going to the places and the subject matters that need to be portrayed, and they're doing that with an expertise and an elegance that iPhone, taken by a random person would never do. And so their perspective, their technique, their artistry, their expression, that is what I think is vitally necessary and what they're bringing to the world through their work.
A big part of all these episodes is going on an adventure, taking you to on a journey somewhere you've never been or something you've never seen before, and being able to make a connection.
Photographer, it does remind us that the camera is a portal to experiencing the world. But of course, the camera is a tool. By filming the people who are using these cameras and digging into who they are, 100% indicative of why they shoot the way they shoot. It makes so much sense when you learn about these photographers and then you see their photos. It perfectly aligns why their photography is the way it is. And by following these photographers on their journeys, we also got to go along. And it became our mission to tell the stories of these journeys in these episodes.
Okay, ready?
We're in go mode.
This is the adventure of a lifetime.
Just imagine how much more is out there.